안녕하세요.
The city of Seoul shimmered with neon lights reflecting off the rain-slicked streets. The heavy traffic echoed with honking horns and revving engines, while hurried pedestrians shielded themselves under colorful umbrellas. At the heart of the city, an imposing glass tower mirrored the world around it. The headquarters of Kang Group, one of South Korea's largest corporations, dominated the skyline, a symbol of power and untouchability. At the top of the skyscraper, Kang Ji-ho was buried in stacks of documents. Known for his cold demeanor and perfectionism, he tolerated neither mistakes nor distractions. His serious expression and impeccable posture radiated authority, and few dared to interrupt him. He sighed as he glanced at the computer screen, where financial reports flickered in complex graphs. It had been a long day, and the night promised to be no different, only adding to his exhaustion. Meanwhile, on the other side of the luxurious building, Han Soo-min rushed through the hallways. A temporary employee in the administrative department, she struggled to balance a pile of files while checking messages on her phone. Her distracted gaze made her collide head-on with a tall, imposing man, sending all the papers tumbling to the floor. The impact was strong, making her stumble backward. With quick reflexes, she caught herself against the wall, but the documents scattered like leaves in the wind. A murmur of surprise echoed through the corridor, and the few employees present stopped to watch. Ji-ho frowned, adjusting his immaculate suit as he looked down at the young woman kneeling, frantically gathering the scattered papers. His sharp eyes assessed the situation with a mix of surprise and irritation. "Do you have any idea who you just ran into?" His voice was cold, but his expression showed more curiosity than anger. Soo-min swallowed hard as she lifted her gaze, locking eyes with the CEO. Her heart pounded. The CEO? Of all people? Him? Her face flushed instantly, and the pressure of the moment left her momentarily speechless. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Kang. It was an accident." She bowed repeatedly, trying to gather everything quickly, her trembling hands betraying her nervousness. Ji-ho watched her for a few seconds. There was something about her that unsettled him, something different from the sycophantic people who surrounded him daily. Her brown hair was slightly messy, and there was a blue ink stain on her blouse, probably from a printer. She didn't even seem to belong in that environment, so unpolished and genuinely flustered. Without wasting time, he picked up one of the documents from the floor, examined it, then handed it back to her. "Make sure this doesn't happen again." With one last intrigued glance, he continued on his way, his footsteps echoing down the silent corridor. Soo-min let out a sigh of relief but also frustration. "I started the week spilling coffee on my blouse and ended it bumping into the CEO. Fantastic." Her heart was still racing, and the lingering sensation of his piercing gaze left her uncomfortably restless. Upstairs, Ji-ho entered his office, but his mind couldn't shake the image of the employee. It was rare for him to take notice of anyone. "Why am I thinking about this?" he wondered, irritated with himself. What neither of them knew was that this small accident would be the first step in a story that would change their lives forever. The following week passed in the blink of an eye for Han Soo-min. Since the incident with Kang Ji-ho, she had done everything possible to avoid crossing paths with him in the hallways of Kang Group. Her heart still raced whenever she remembered the CEO's intense gaze, and the last thing she wanted was to draw his attention again. However, fate seemed to have other plans for her. On a cold Monday morning, Soo-min received an urgent email. She had to personally deliver a contract for the CEO to sign. Her stomach twisted when she saw Ji-ho's name as the recipient, but she had no choice. Gathering her courage, she made her way to the executive floor and knocked on his office door. "Enter." His firm voice sounded from the other side, and she swallowed hard before turning the doorknob. Ji-ho was seated at his desk, typing something on his computer. His serious eyes lifted to analyze her for a brief moment before returning to the screen. "Mr. Kang, I brought the contract for your review." Her voice came out lower than she intended, and she held the document tightly in her hands. Ji-ho took the papers and flipped through them quickly. Soo-min tried not to stare too much, but his presence was overwhelming. He exuded confidence and an aura of power that made her uncomfortably nervous. You work in the administrative department, correct? He asked suddenly, without taking his eyes off the document. Su-min blinked, surprised by the question. Yes, sir. I've been here for 3 months, as a temporary employee. Ji-ho signed the contract and handed it back to her. How has your experience at the company been? He asked, leaning slightly back in his chair. Su-min felt her face heat up. Was he genuinely interested in her answer, or was he just being polite? It's been a great opportunity. I've never worked in such a large company before, so I'm still adjusting. She smiled slightly, trying to hide her nervousness. Ji-ho didn't smile back, but something in his gaze softened. I see. Keep working hard, he said simply. Su-min gave a quick bow and turned to leave, but as she opened the door, she heard his voice again. Han Su-min. She stopped mid-motion, surprised that he remembered her name. Yes, sir? Don't drop any more documents in the hallways. For the first time, there was a hint of humor in his tone. Her eyes widened, and, blushing, she gave a quick bow before rushing out. Ji-ho watched the door close and, without realizing it, let a small smile slip. He didn't know why, but he had a feeling he would be seeing much more of that woman. Winter was growing harsher in Seoul, covering the city with a thin layer of snow. Inside Kang Group, the frantic routine continued, but Han Su-min noticed a subtle change. Frequent encounters with Kang Ji-ho. He seemed to appear at the most unexpected moments, whether through direct emails requesting reports that weren't even within her responsibilities, or by crossing paths with her in the hallways. That afternoon, Su-min was in the company cafe, trying to warm up with a cappuccino when a familiar voice sounded behind her. I didn't know administrative employees had time for such long breaks. Ji-ho approached, his presence immediately drawing the attention of everyone in the room. Su-min choked slightly on her coffee and turned around quickly, blushing upon seeing him there, as impeccable as ever. Ah, Mr. Kang, I'm not taking long. I just needed something warm to keep working. She gripped her cup tightly, afraid she might spill it. Ji-ho raised an eyebrow as he took a coffee for himself. He didn't walk away immediate, something rare for a man who usually avoided prolonged interactions. His presence unsettled her, but not in a bad way. No need to justify yourself. Everyone needs a breather. He brought the cup to his lips, glancing at her sideways. How's work going? Su-min blinked a few times. Was he casually talking to her? That didn't make sense. Well, sir, I'm still learning to handle some of the tasks, but I'm doing my best. Her tone was sincere, and Ji-ho noticed it. He nodded slightly, as if assessing her words. Before he could respond, a group of executives entered the cafe, immediately drawing Ji-ho's attention. His expression shifted slightly, his posture changing in their presence. He straightened up and looked at Su-min for a moment before stepping away. Get back to work when you're finished. His voice returned to its usual formality before he walked off, leaving Su-min with a mix of surprise and curiosity. She felt her heart race. Why was he getting so close? Was it just a coincidence, or was there something more? What she didn't know was that Ji-ho was asking himself the same question. In the following days, Su-min noticed that her interactions with Ji-ho were becoming more frequent. He always seemed to appear when she least expected it, whether to request reports he could easily delegate to others or simply to ask casual questions about her routine. No matter how much she tried to ignore it, Su-min felt her heart race every time she saw him. Ji-ho's intense gaze, his commanding presence, and the way he seemed to care left her confused. But at the same time, she knew there was an invisible line between them that could not be crossed. He was the CEO. She was a temporary employee. They belonged to different worlds. That afternoon, as she was finishing a report, she received an unexpected call. Her supervisor informed her that she needed to report to Ji-ho's office immediately. Her heart pounded at the order, and her mind filled with possibilities. What could it be? Upon entering the spacious office, she found Ji-ho on the phone, his expression severe, gaze fixed on the panoramic window. As soon as he saw her, he hung up and gestured for her to sit. Su-min, I need your help with a company charity event. He got straight to the point. Do you have experience in event planning? She blinked, surprised by the question. Yes, sir. Before working here, I helped organize some community events. Jiho nodded, as if that was the answer he had been hoping for. Perfect. I want you to assist me personally in preparing for this Friday's event. There will be investors and influential figures, and everything needs to be flawless. The shock made Sumin take a few seconds to respond. Working directly with Jiho, it was an important task, but at the same time, a problem. Office rumors were already starting, and this would only make them worse. Of course, sir. I will do my best. I know you will. His gaze was intense, and for a brief moment, there seemed to be something more in his expression, but he quickly looked away. Now, get back to work. Sumin stood up and left the office, her hands sweating. What was happening? Why had he chosen her for something so important? And, most of all, why did she feel like her heart was becoming more and more entangled? Jiho watched her leave and let out a sigh. He was asking himself the same question. Friday arrived faster than Sumin had expected. The grand charity event hosted by Kang Group was about to begin, and the pressure was intense. Throughout the week, she had worked tirelessly, managing decorations, the guest list, and the event schedule. However, the biggest challenge was something else entirely: being so close to Kang Jiho. The CEO was demanding and a perfectionist, but something about him had changed. The lingering glances, the quiet moments when they were alone, the subtle gestures of concern. It was as if an invisible tension hung between them, something even he didn't seem to know how to handle. By late afternoon, Sumin received an unexpected call. A staff member from the protocol team informed her that the event director had instructed all organizers to be appropriately dressed for the occasion. With no time to go home, she was led to a room where a dress awaited her. Who arranged this? She asked, surprised. Orders from the CEO himself. The staff member replied with a mysterious smile before leaving. Sumin's heart pounded. She hesitated for a moment, but knew she had no choice. Minutes later, when she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The navy blue dress accentuated her silhouette in a way she had never experienced before. Her hair was elegantly styled, and the light makeup enhanced her natural beauty. As she descended to the ballroom, she felt the weight of all eyes on her, but only one gaze made her hold her breath. Jiho watched her from the staircase, holding a glass of wine. For a brief moment, his eyes seemed to gleam, as if he were seeing something he wasn't supposed to. Then, with an unreadable expression, he approached. You look very nice. His voice was low but carried something different. Sumin smiled shyly. Thank you, Mr. Kang. Jiho frowned slightly. Kang Jiho, he corrected. Just Jiho tonight. She blinked, surprised by the informality. Before she could respond, a cold voice interrupted the moment. So this is why you've been acting strange lately, Jiho. The voice of Kang Min-sok, his uncle and a powerful company shareholder, cut through the air like a blade. Sumin froze. The guests turned their attention to the scene. A temporary employee? This is a joke. If your father were alive, he would be ashamed. Min-sok spat his words with disdain. Jiho remained firm, his eyes narrowing. Min-sok, this is none of your concern. Of course it is. Your image affects the company, and you know that. Are you really willing to risk everything for a girl who shouldn't even be here? Sumin felt the blood drain from her face. The murmurs around them grew louder, and the pressure became unbearable. But before she could say anything, Jiho stunned everyone. Yes, I am, his voice rang out, strong and unwavering. The ballroom fell into absolute silence. Jiho looked straight at Sumin, and at that moment, she knew there was no turning back. The grand ballroom fell into absolute silence. Jiho's words lingered in the air like a forbidden confession. He had just declared, in front of all Kang Group shareholders and investors, that he was willing to risk everything for Sumin. Kang Min-sok's expression twisted with restrained fury. Have you lost your mind, Jiho? He stepped closer, lowering his voice, but keeping the hostility. Do you understand what this means? The shareholders will demand an emergency meeting. Your credibility as CEO will be on the line. Jiho remained steadfast. Let them demand whatever they want. I don't bow to threats. Min's heart pounded. It was surreal to think that Kang Ji-ho, one of the most powerful men in South Korea, was challenging everything for her. But before she could react, an aide hurried over and whispered something in Ji-ho's ear. His gaze hardened. "The board wants to see me now?" He let out a heavy sigh and turned to Soo-min. "I have to deal with this. Wait for me." She only nodded, stunned. Ji-ho left the ballroom, and the tension left behind was almost unbearable. Many eyes turned to Soo-min, and a few cruel whispers reached her ears. She felt her legs weaken. What was she doing there? Hours later, Ji-ho emerged from the board meeting with a heavy expression. The decision had been clear. Either he distanced himself from Soo-min, or his position as CEO would be put at risk. He knew Min-suk had orchestrated this pressure. His uncle had always wanted control over the company, and saw this situation as the perfect opportunity to destabilize him. But Ji-ho was not a man who bowed to threats. Returning to the ballroom, he found Soo-min on the terrace, gazing at the illuminated city. "Are you okay?" His voice was low, laced with concern. She turned around, surprised. "I'm trying to understand why you did this. Do you have any idea what you might lose?" Ji-ho gave a small smile, stepping closer. "I spent years living for this company, trying to fit into my family's expectations. For the first time, I found something that truly matters, and I'm not giving it up." Min's eyes filled with tears. "But your family, your position." Ji-ho gently took her hands. "The company will survive without me, but I don't want to live without you." Soo-min felt her heart tighten. The cold and distant man she had met had transformed before her, and then, without thinking, she stepped forward and embraced him, letting the tears fall. Months later, Kang Group remained strong under Ji-ho's leadership. He had faced the board, restructured the management, and proved that his relationship with Soo-min did not interfere with his ability to lead. Min-suk was removed from the company, and life took a new path. On a beautiful spring day, surrounded by friends and loved ones, Ji-ho and Soo-min were married in an elegant and heartfelt ceremony. He had not only chosen love, but had built a new family with the woman who had changed his life. The fairy tale that many doubted became reality, and together they wrote a new chapter of happiness.